In 1969, Project Blue Book shut down, but the cases just kept on stacking up. Today, we'll be digging into 5 military UFO incidents that I believe the new task force created by Anna Paulina Luna should investigate. Of course, I can assume here that their top priority is going to be the gimbal, the Go Fast, the Tic Tac, and probably the sightings in and around Catalina Island off the coast of California. But pushing those aside, these cases that we're covering here today are ones that should be addressed. And these aren't just silly campfire tales. These stories are backed up by radar data, by nuclear facility breaches, and military witnesses who paid a severe price for speaking up. So let's break down the paper trail and see what the government missed or choose to ignore. Let's get straight into it. We're going to go in chronological order, starting off with not only the oldest case, but also the most famous one. But I won't bore you with all the same information that's always regurgitated, but instead provide information that is lesser known, along with providing the official explanation given and the gaps in that same information. So in July of 1947, rancher Mac Brazel discovered unusual debris on his New Mexico ranch following an intense thunderstorm, the Roswell Army Airfield. Because this was actually before the Air Force was created back in September of 1947. They initially recovered a flying disc. That's how the newspaper took off, and they're like, oh, we got a flying saucer. But then they very quickly redacted that statement, actually the very next day, and Brazel's testimony, it changed dramatically over time, from describing very strange, lightweight materials, unlike anything he had seen before, to later downplaying it as tinfoil and rubber strips, suggesting this possible coercion. And there's this idea that he was contacted by the US military to downplay his story and that he would get paid for it. Right after this incident took place, he got himself a new truck. But these key witnesses also include the mortician Glenn Dennis, who received very unusual requests about child-sized coffins and body preservation methods from the RAAF officials, and Dennis later reported encountering a distressed nurse who described treating crash victims with non-human characteristics. Then you have Miriam Bush, an RAAF hospital executive secretary, who reportedly observed these recovered bodies, and it became one of several witnesses who experienced significant personal decline. These are things that are not usually mentioned when people address Roswell, so hang tight for this, because Bush later developed alcoholism. She reported that she was being surveilled. Wherever she went, she was being followed and watched. And then she was later found dead in 1989 under very suspicious circumstances, officially ruled out by taking her own life. But people think otherwise. Similarly, Major Jesse Marcel and witness T. Proctor struggled with alcoholism as well following the incident. So it didn't happen before July of 1947. It wasn't until right after alcoholism became their crutch. And the case's initial hours involved multiple military units, and this generated widespread media coverage before the official narrative changed. And here is how it changed. So first they were like, oh my gosh, a flying saucer, to wait, no, actually, it's a weather balloon, which was classified as Project Mogul. However, we didn't know about that until years later, because it was described as a classified program using high-altitude surveillance balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. But when this proved insufficient to explain the witness accounts of bodies, the Air Force, because it quickly switched from the Army Airfield to the Air Force that again was created in September of 1947, they then introduced, oh, you know what? It wasn't Project Mogul, guys. Keeping you on your toes here. It was actually Project High Dive, citing anthropomorphic test dummies dropped from high altitudes. Okay, so where are we looking? What's going on? But this created a pretty significant timeline problem. As the dummy tests occurred years after the incident, Lieutenant Colonel Richard French later complicated the narrative by claiming that two crashes occurred, not one that took place in Roswell, but two, with the first craft allegedly downed by an experimental electromagnetic pulse weapon from the White Sands. Then you had nuclear physicist Stanton Freeman, who brought the case back to the public because this was very quickly buried in 1947. People were like all hyped about it, and then the story died, like completely, until Stanton Freeman was like, wait, this case is interesting. How come no one's looking into it? He goes to Roswell, and then in 1978, it resurfaces, and now it is known as the most famous case of all time because Stanton Freeman was like, there's some weird stuff going on in Roswell, New Mexico. Let me do a further investigation on this. And he's finding out this paperwork. He's speaking to witnesses, and he's like, oh my gosh, something really crazy took place there in July of 1947. But now here are the investigation gaps. And with this kind of paper trail, I think it gives the new task force enough information for them to begin to do their own investigation, hopefully get files declassified and make them public so that we know, the public knows what really happened in Roswell. There are so many theories, there are so many conspiracy theories as well as to what took place, but none of us actually know. So here are some investigation gaps. In 1995, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, report revealed systematic documentation problems that prevent full verification of any explanation prompted by Congressman Stephen Schiff. And then crucial RAAF administrative records from 45 to 49 were, according to Schiff, destroyed without proper authority or documentation of who ordered it, including all outgoing messages from July of 1947, precisely with the initial flying disc press release and redaction occurred. There were also no shipping manifests that exist documenting debris transfer to the Wright Field or in Fort Worth, where Major Marcel delivered these materials, allegedly, as they say. And the Air Force's 1994 report, which was also published in the Roswell Report Fact or Fiction in the New Mexico desert, relies on Project Mogul's general context but lacks significant crash-related paperwork from July of 1947, where they said, actually, guys, it was a weather balloon, it was Project Mogul, but there isn't a paper trail to back that up. And then Project Mogul Flight Number 4, cited as the crashed balloon, lacks launch confirmation in Charles Moore's logs, which creates a fundamental gap between the explanation and the evidence. The case also features unusual patterns of witness intimidation, media manipulation, and document destruction that suggests a coordinated effort to control information about the incident. And the proximity to very sensitive nuclear weapon facilities and the development of multiple military intelligence agencies add layers of complexity to all of these investigation gaps, because it was known many years later, if not decades, that Roswell and the Roswell Air Force Base had nuclear weapons, which there is this very, very strong connection between UFOs and nukes. There's probably a lot of information in the archives that people need a clearance to have access to in order to receive this information. And maybe with this new task force, they might hopefully get that clearance in order to enter those archives to retrieve that information from Roswell. Let's talk about the Washington, D.C. sighting in 1952, another very famous case, and one that, again, I'll give you just a brief summary of what happened, usually providing you information that you're not as familiar with, along with the official explanation and the investigation gaps. In July of 1952, the Washington, D.C. UFO events began when air traffic controller Edward Nugent detected multiple unidentified objects on radar at the Washington National Airport, and the incident escalated when additional radar stations confirmed objects performing unconventional maneuvers over restricted airspace, including over the White House and the Capitol building. The object demonstrated apparent technological abilities beyond 1952 aircraft, executing instant accelerations, sharp turns, and reaching up to speeds to about 7,000 miles per hour. And the craft exhibited what appeared to be intelligent maneuver and systematically avoiding interceptors by vanishing when fighter jets approached and then reappeared after these fighter jets withdrew due to low fuel. The multiple radar stations tracked the object simultaneously, eliminating single station malfunctions as an explanation. Civil pilots and ground observers provided visual confirmation matching that radar data, including airline crews reporting bright lights performing impossible maneuvers. This is such a famous case and one that isn't talked about as much as you would think so. Like, it's not at the same level as Roswell, but these were UFOs being seen on multiple occasions over Washington, D.C., over the White House and the Capitol building. Military jets chased them down and weren't able to reach speeds to get to them. And a lot of people saw this happen. But here was the official explanation. Because the Air Force's response resulted in a major Pentagon press conference, the largest since World War II, by the way, where Major General John Samford and Roger Ramey attributed the incidents to temperature inversions causing radar mirages. What you saw was only an illusion. How do you explain the pilots attempting to chase these down, or the tons of witnesses that saw these, right? Come on. Then Project Blue Book head captain Edward Ruppelt didn't hear about this incident by getting a call from the White House. He saw it through the newspaper. Even though he was in Washington when this incident took place, he learned about the case through a newspaper. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a UFO investigation without astronomer and debunker Dr. Donald Menzel, who supported this explanation of them being temperature inversions. Never in any case that his name comes up does he give an actual good explanation. It's always something that doesn't make any sense, and that in many respects he doesn't look at all the information to come up with a conclusion. So much so that even J. Allen Hynek was kind of like disappointed in many of Menzel's explanations. And the military claimed temperature inversions were both present both nights, and visible sightings could be explained as misidentified stars, meteors, or even atmospheric reflections. I mean, they've been using that same explanation for decades. Now it's drones, but before it was, guys, Venus, stars, meteors, atmospheric reflections. Come on, get it together. But here are the investigation gaps. The critical evidence remains unaccounted for in official records. The Air Force files lack precise meteorological data from the specific nights, relying instead on general claims about summer weather patterns, the very generic explanations. And then the US Weather Bureau disputed the inversion explanation, noting that inversions typically produce linear patterns on radar, not distinct objects. And then Ruppelt later makes statements which were noted in his book from 1956, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, revealed that despite inversions being common in DC that summer, similar radar targets appeared only during these specific types of incidents. Radar operators Barnes and Howard Coughlin consistently rejected the inversion theory, insisting the returns displayed characteristics distinct from atmospheric interferences. And then physicist James E. McDonald's 1960s investigation, including interviews with pilots and radar personnel, concluded the official explanation was physically impossible given the target's behavior. Now, despite President Truman's direct involvement requesting answers, no White House memos or correspondence about the incident have been located in the archives, so they say. And the case's proximity to crucial government facilities and multiple radar confirmations suggest significant documentation should exist beyond what's currently available. This case is not one that is very well known, and if you look at the information, the explanation, and the aftermath, you would think it'd be a lot more famous. On October 1st, 1948, Lieutenant George F. Gorman's 27-minute encounter involved Gorman, an experienced military pilot, engaging with a bright object approximately 6 to 8 inches in diameter that demonstrated extraordinary flight capabilities, and the object executed precise maneuvers, forcing 2 near collision scenarios where Gorman had to dive to avoid impact. And when he attempted to pursue this object, his P-51 Mustang stalled at 14,000 feet, unable to match the object's vertical acceleration. Then ground confirmation came from multiple sources. You had air traffic controller Lloyd D. Jensen and H.E. Johnson at Hector Airport tracking the object, and civilian pilot Dr. A.E. Cannon and his passenger in a Piper Cub witnessed it, and 2 Civil Aeronautics Authority employees provided additional ground observations. Gorman reported closing in to within 50 feet of this object, noting its distinct edges and an unusual lack of glare. Now, this case is insane, but here was the official explanation. By 1949, the Air Force attributed the sighting to a lightened weather balloon launched from Fargo at 8:50 p.m. The Air Material Command classified the incident as secret and threatened Gorman with court-martial for discussing it. That's the crazy part, indicating a strong desire to control the narrative. So this guy higher up than Gorman said, if you speak out about this, bad things will happen. You will probably go to prison because you spoke about a classified project. But Gorman wasn't buying it. He's like, no, that was not a weather balloon. That was not some secret project. That had to be a UFO. And then here comes in astronomer and debunker Dr. Donald Menzel, who later offered a conflicting explanation, suggesting that Gorman was not chasing some secret project. No, come on. He was actually, in fact, chasing Jupiter. Though this contradicted both the balloon theory and the multiple witness account. Because as you remember, Gorman wasn't the only witness. Air traffic control saw it, some civilian pilots saw it, and so on. It wasn't just Gorman. But looking at the investigation gaps, critical documentation supported the official explanation remains missing. There's no information on this secret project. And despite citing a specific balloon launch, no launch logs, no flight path data, or tracking records from that night exist, at least in the Project Sign files. The balloon explanation presents significant physical inconsistencies. Weather balloons typically move at about 5 to 10 miles per hour, while Gorman estimated the object's speed to about 600 miles per hour. The Air Force's explanation also failed to address how a balloon could execute precise maneuvers reported by multiple witnesses or maintain position despite strong winds. J. Allen Hynek initially supported the Air Force's conclusion because he was being paid by them, but later recanted it in his 1970 book, The UFO Experience, acknowledging he had hastily concurred without sufficient evidence. And the case's immediate classification as secret and threats of court-martial suggests a level of significance at odds with a simple weather balloon misidentification. Not only that, but Gorman almost hit this object twice. Keep that in mind. This is another case that has sufficient data, and I think there's a lot more information in the archives that the task force should investigate. This next case, very well known, also outside of the country, but it was on an airbase that is controlled by the United States, and that is the Rendlesham Forest incident from December of 1980. This is a fantastic case, and there is so much information. There is so much of a paper trail. It's truly unbelievable. Security officers Jim Penniston and John Burroughs documented specific environmental anomalies during their encounter. Intense static electricity affecting the environment, physical discomfort, and electromagnetic interference with communication equipment. Penniston's direct contact with the craft revealed distinct tactile properties, a glass-smooth surface contrasting with sandpaper rough symbols, and notable heat radiation despite these freezing temperatures, because this took place really during the holidays in December of 1980. And both witnesses experienced a 45-minute time loss, later confirmed through military timepieces and base logs. I had the pleasure to speak with John Burroughs on his incident. He goes into great detail. I highly recommend that you watch that interview. That link will be in the description box below for you, because when you hear it from a witness, it's different than reading it from any book, from watching any documentary, because he fills in the gaps on questions that people might have, such as myself. And with this particular case, as I had mentioned in the initial incident, there were data logs. Not only that, these guys, very specifically John Burroughs, suffered from health ailments. And then you even had the HALT memo created by Colonel Charles Halt, which is public information. But the official responses that were given, regardless of the tons of witnesses that were there, it's truly remarkable, including CIA involvement via C-5A cargo plane from Langley Air Force Base, and aggressive interrogation of witnesses, in this case, Jim Penniston and John Burroughs. And both these guys developed severe medical conditions within just 3 weeks. Symptoms consistent with radiation exposure, including inner ear dysfunction, visual problems, and distinct physical markers like Penniston's whitened gums, which is believed to be related to radiation poisoning. Burroughs later required a pacemaker due to heart complications. And the military's handling, this part is insane. Because this happened to John Burroughs, they're like, you know what? We're actually now going to make all of your medical records classified. Nobody can help you. Good luck. No doctor will ever get access to your records until 2015, when Senator John McCain helped John Burroughs to make his medical records declassified so that he could get the help that he needed to fix what happened to him in December of 1980. So do the math on how long his medical records were classified by the military. And then in 2010, Jim Peniston had mentioned to the public that when he had touched the craft, he had recorded binary code containing precise coordinates of ancient archaeological sites and the mythical location of High Brazil, adding a very interesting layer to this entire case. But here are the investigation gaps. The primary U.S. record consists solely of Lieutenant Colonel Halt's January 13, 1981 memo to the Ministry of Defense. Despite over 40 military witnesses, no official USAF investigation exists post Project Blue Book's 1969 termination. Then, radar data from the 26th to the 28th of December remains unavailable from both US and UK sources, though operators reported significant anomalies. Then, former MOD UFO investigator Nick Pope confirmed that such radar data should exist, suggesting deliberate withholding rather than routine record disposal. And the incident's proximity to nuclear weapons storage facilities also add strategic significance to these documentation gaps, because there is a connection between UFOs and nuclear facilities. Doesn't matter what part of the world. They are being seen consistently over the decades. One of the most recent ones took place last year, where UFOs were seen in India over a nuclear facility. Then you had the official lighthouse explanation that what Halt saw, according to the Halt memo, this light blinked at him, and that what he was seeing and that his men was seeing was merely a lighthouse light shining in their area, and that's all it was. But this fails to address the recorded physical effects, the multiple witness accounts, the radiation readings, or the long-term medical impacts on the military personnel, specifically John Burroughs. This is a case that not only has a very long paper trail, there has to be information in the archives, and then on top of that, I think it'd be a very interesting joint operation between the US and the UK. Anna Paulina Luna had mentioned that in the creation of this new task force, she would like to collaborate with other countries. When we're looking at UFO incidents, there have been reports, not only by Project Blue Book, but also by Arrow, that there are these kind of joint collaborations where the US really is receiving data from other countries. It would be interesting if the new task force will be doing the same. And I think this case would be a great foundation to do so. The Phoenix Lights, 1997. So recent, such a crazy case, and a lot of public information. Here, as I have been doing for all of the cases, give you a brief description of what happened, looking at the official explanation, and then looking at the investigation gaps where the new task force can hopefully fill in that information. On March 13, 1997, the Phoenix Lights event featured a progression of sightings spanning multiple locations and times. Initial reports came from Henderson, Nevada at 7 p.m., describing a V-shaped craft larger than a Boeing 747, and then by 8:15 p.m., the object reached Prescott Valley, where witnesses reported a solid structure blocking the lights, some claiming they could have touched the craft's surface witness. That's how close it was. Then multiple witnesses, including pilot Tim Lee, provided consistent dimensional estimates, approximately 700 feet per arm of the V-shaped craft, moving about 20 miles per hour with geometric precision. The military response, centered on the Maryland Air National Guard's Operation Snowbird, claimed A-10 aircraft dropped a Lu-2B/B illumination flares. However, this explanation addressed only the later stationary lights, not the earlier V-shaped formation. This next part is well known, but I'll just quickly address it, that Arizona Governor Fife Symington initially deflected the public's concern with the mock of a press conference, dressing up as aide as an alien. But then he reversed that position in 2007 because he confirmed witnessing a massive silent delta-shaped craft, rejecting the flare explanation that was given in 1997. The Air Force delegated responses to local bases, the Luke Air Force Base's 56th Flight Wing and Davis-Monthan, who provided minimal investigation despite Phoenix Councilwoman Frances Emma Barwood's documentation of 700 witness inquiries. So there were thousands of witnesses, but this councilwoman was able to collect documentation of 700 of them. But this case was so quickly brushed off as a military operation, as military flares, and that's it. But because this is a more recent case, there are still so many witnesses that are able to be interviewed today that this might be one of the first cases that the task force might investigate because it is so recent. Also worth noting, and one part that isn't addressed very often, is that during the Phoenix Lights incident, the Palo Verde nuclear generating station sat just 50 miles west of Phoenix in Tonopah. And as America's largest nuclear power plant, it housed 3 massive reactors, and the second wave of UFO sightings, the stationary lights over the Sierra Estella Mountains, appeared about 40 to 50 miles from this facility. And this proximity adds strategic significance to the event, even though Palo Verde wasn't a military installation. It still housed a nuclear power plant. But here are the investigation gaps. Critical data remains missing. No radar logs from Phoenix Sky Harbor, Luke Air Force Base, or Davis-Monthan confirm the reported A-10 formation or flare deployment. The FAA's standard 2-week tape retention policy resulted in no preserved radar data, despite the event's very massive scale. And while Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones confirmed flare drops in 2007, no supporting documentation, flight plans, pilot debriefs, or Operation Snowbird schedules have ever been released. Now, is that saying it didn't happen? No, but because we don't have that information in our hand, people can make all the assumptions that they want. Luke Air Force Base's shifting narrative from initial denial to later claiming oversight of the flare operations also lacks documented explanation. Then the absence of military footage from the A-10s or range cameras, given the event's visibility over a major metropolitan area, represents a very significant oversight. The case's interception with nuclear infrastructures and mass witness cooperation suggests documentation should exist beyond what's currently available. Then, we got to add this in too. Kurt Russell first spoke about him seeing the Phoenix Lights on the One Show, that's what it's called, on BBC, which aired on April 27th, 2017, so 20 years later, where Russell revealed that he was the general aviation pilot who reported the mysterious lights to air traffic control on March 13, 1997, while flying his son Oliver to Phoenix. And he recounted seeing 6 lights in a uniform V-shaped over the airport and noted that he hadn't thought much of it until 2 years later when Goldie was watching a TV program about the incident, prompting him to reconnect the experience to the widely reported event. He experienced that case in 97, then he just forgot about it until Goldie was just watching the program on TV and he's like, wait a second, I was there. I saw that with my own eyeballs. Interesting stuff. This next one is a bonus one because it's not a case, but it is a place, being the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is a Air Force base that is rumored to have received UFO debris, to have reverse engineering programs in it, and so much more. I think that it would be wise for the new task force to get information, if they can, from this Air Force base, because there have been some very interesting testimonies coming out from people that used to work there or know about what takes place in that base, which we'll be covering very shortly. But it is definitely one that would catch my attention if the new task force does an investigation into the space. The Wright-Patterson Air Force Base functioned as America's primary UFO investigation headquarters from 47 to 69, housing the Air Technical Intelligence Center and 3 major UFO study programs: Project Sign in 47, Project Grudge in 49, and Project Blue Book from 52 to 69. The base's Foreign Technology Division specialized in reverse engineering advanced aerospace technology. But beyond UFO research, Wright-Patterson managed critical nuclear-related operations, coordinating with the Miami Berg's Mound Laboratory, produced polonium-210, triggers for nuclear weapons, and integrating German V-2 rocket scientists through Operation Paperclip. There have been multiple credible witnesses that are connected to Wright-Pat to recover UFO material. Intelligence Officer Jesse Marcel and Lieutenant Walter Haut provided sworn affidavits stating unusual material from Roswell were transported to the Wright Field, which then became Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Senator Barry Goldwater documented being denied to access Blue Room allegedly containing UFO materials in the 1970s. Then pilot Oliver Henderson reportedly transported Roswell material to the base. Philip Corso wrote in his book The Day After Roswell, which was released 1 year before his death, account specifically identifying Building 620 as housing memory metal that were samples tested in the 1950s that were retrieved from UFOs. But a lot of this critical documentation remains missing or classified. While Blue Book files are public, either Sign and Grudge records are incomplete. Then significant missing documents include shipping manifests for material sent to Wright-Pat, building logs for alleged storage facilities, and internal memos about UFO research. FOIA requests regarding the rumored Hangar 18 or Building 18 receive generic denials or mogul balloon references. In my opinion, these are the cases and the Air Force bases that should be investigated by the task force to get this information declassified, the ones that are just locked up in the archives collecting dust, because these are not only very famous cases, but ones that have a lot of information. There's a good amount of public documentation. Now it's just getting that documentation that has just been put into a filing cabinet, never seen again. These cases could very much be revived like the Roswell incident that took place in 47, but wasn't seen again until 1978. Can we see that same level of revival with these other cases? I really hope so. I really do. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button right down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you enjoy UFO news, updates, case studies, and more. Before you head out, in order to stay up to date with international UFO news that's taking place right here, right now, take a look at my website at ufonews.co, not .com, .co. That link will be in the description box below. If you also want to support this channel, if you are enjoying the content that you are seeing right here, the best place to do so is to become a Patreon member. Get behind the scenes videos, pictures, along with being part of live events, getting merch, and so much more. Thank you so much to everyone watching this. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies. If you enjoy the strange and the mysterious, UFOs, the paranormal, and cryptids, this channel is for you. So make sure to subscribe, as I do 3 videos right here every single week, and hit that notification bell so you do not miss any of the bonus content I post right here.